But like I say, with a top-of-the-range facilities, with a top designer, with money being no object, with no stone unturned, that begs one question with Aston Martin. Is the driver lineup good enough to deliver a World Championship and a World Constructors Championship if they've got the car to do that? Welcome to Coffee Corner Motorsport, Four Beans the podcast. I'm your host, Terry, and this is the Formula One news show, Espresso News, where I bring you all the latest news from the paddock to the podcast, of course, via my daily headlines that I post each day over on my social medias. Now, that is a really seamless line into what I'm going to tell you, and that is hit that subscribe button if you've not already done so. If you want the latest, up-to-date Formula One news, what are you waiting for? Hit subscribe, hit like, hit follow, turn those notifications on, and you will get the latest, unbiased, hard-hitting Formula One news straight to your pages. Well, that's what they say anyway. Anyway, enough about that. What have we got on this week's show? We've got Oliver Oates talking about Jack Doohan. We've got Aston Martin and the moves they're making. We've got Zhou returning to Ferrari. We've also got Audi's headquarters. And we've got Mercedes and Valtteri Bottas and the latest comments from Toto Wolff. So if all of that takes your fancy and you've got a spare 30 minutes, grab your coffee, sit down, strap in, and let's give it some full beans. Really need to get some music there, don't I? Right, let's start with Oliver Oates. Now, there's been a lot of speculation, quite naturally, about Jack Doohan and Franco Colapinto, and of course, that second seat at Alpine. Now, we're all assuming that Pierre Gasly is a shoo-in and that he's going to keep his seat, whereas with the signing of Franco Colapinto and pretty much anyone else who's got the title reserve driver on there, if you're Flavio Briatore, then you're putting Jack Doohan's seat at risk. Lots of speculation, of course, about these 6 races we keep hearing about, but what is the actual truth behind Jack Doohan, Franco Colapinto, and just what are Alpine actually saying officially? Well, Flavio Briatore, he's not one to mince his words. He's came on and been quite open and honest about it. He said there's only a few things in life that are certain, and that is, of course, death, pretty much so. Thank you for that, words of wisdom, Flavio. He said that they'll start the season with both Pierre and with Jack Doohan, but as far as anything else beyond that is going, he's not alluding to absolutely anything. Now, with regards to Franco Colapinto, I've said this many times on the podcast before, you don't spend the sort of money that Alpine had to pay Williams to secure Franco's services. You don't give them a multi-year deal to have them sit in the paddock, basically, sit in the garage watching the cars go past. You don't do that. He's there for a reason, and that is to take a seat, which puts Jack under some extreme pressure right from the off, really, right from the get-go, right from probably even pre-season testing, if I'm honest. But Oliver Oates, he's kind of playing the peacemaker as a team principal, or peacemaker, I should say. So he's the one playing it down a bit, saying that actually, Jack Doohan's going to be given a fair crack at the whip. He's in there, he's their driver, and that actually Franco is a backup plan. Franco, of course, has come out and said that, if called upon, he's ready. James Vowles in the interview this week where he refused to be drawn into it, basically, where he was just like, it's Alpine's problem, it's not my problem, which fair play to James. I think any team principal talk about an opposing team would have done exactly the same. So it's clear that whatever's in this contract of Franco is between Alpine and Franco Briatore. We know that Flavio likes the idea of Franco in the car. Now, whether or not he likes him because he rates him as a better driver, whether or not he likes him because of the commercial value he brings, whether or not it's a combination of both, who knows? I mean, ironically, he is Jack Doohan's manager, so you kind of think he'd be willing to stand by his man. It should be noted, as I've said before, Jack was promoted up before sort of Flavio took over in terms of that role. So, and also before we saw the rise of Franco, obviously getting that Williams seat. Now, he was obviously reserved and talked about, but no one knew the impact that he would have in that second half of the season when he stepped in for Logan Sargent after the Zandvoort Grand Prix. So there's a lot of elements which have gone into this. Alpine obviously moved fast. Apparently they paid a lot of money to secure Franco. We're hearing that it wasn't a instalment plan or anything like that. It was a basic, here's your money. Williams obviously put the buyback back into it, which we've heard so much about. But by all intents and purposes, that points you towards you'd expect Franco to be in the car sooner rather than later. But are we doing Jack Doohan a misjustice here? We're all assuming that he's going to be out after 5-6 races. Just to clarify that, that's not, he's got a race contract for 5 or 6 races. Now, when they sign a driver for a year contract, you don't sign him for 5 or 6 races. You sign him for the season. But as I've said before, contracts are there to be broken. Contracts are there to literally, pay out for a driver. They're there to put your own driver in, especially a rookie. Rookies don't command the sort of respect and loyalty that an established world champion driver does, so their contracts are very easy to break. There will be performance clauses in there. There will be things in there that stops people, sort of get in. I suppose there'd be things in there that makes it very easy for the team to get rid of you, is what I'm trying to say. So whilst it may not be 5 or 6 races like we keep talking about, or keep hearing about, I should say, it's most likely there's a performance thing in there, and the money that Jack Doohan is on would be easily covered by Franco's sponsors should Alpine wish to buy Jack out and just terminate his contract and rip it up. Very similar to obviously what Red Bull did with Checo's when they ended his contract early. So whilst there may be performance clauses in there, be under no illusion. If Alpine want Franco in that car, it's very easy for them to do so. And certainly they would not bat an eyelid at actually putting Franco into the car in terms of the cost before doing it, because ultimately they'd recuperate that easily with Franco's sponsors. So yeah, I think that for me, I think they're playing a bit of good cop, bad cop with this. Oliver is quite clearly playing the good cop of on the team principal. I'm going to give him the time. Flavio, wow. He don't need to play the bad boy, does he, or the bad cop, because he's already there. So, he's made some very unpopular decisions since returning to Alpine. It's the reason why Alpine brought Flavio back into it, to make those unpopular decisions, to be the fool guy, to be the person who takes the flak for shutting down the engine department, for cost cutting, for savings, for sacking people. He is the ultimate fool guy for Renault as it is, and the Renault board. They're very much firmly hanging everything on Flavio, and this advisor role and the future of the team is all geared towards what he's doing and what he's bringing in. So yeah, I think this is just very much a good cop, bad cop. Oliver Oakes is playing the good cop as a team principal, Flavio playing the bad cop, and ultimately Jack Doohan's got to do his talking on track. I mean, the ball is in his court, as they say in other sports. Ultimately, it's up to him to come out and perform. If Jack comes out and performs and does well and gets close to Pierre, he's going to make it incredibly more difficult for that. He's going to make it incredibly harder for them to actually go, can you actually pull me out of this seat because I'm performing well? That's up to him to do that. There's, no one else can do that for him. That's probably his only saving grace at the moment. If he can find a way to either get close to Pierre or beat Pierre, then actually he might be able to hold off Franco for, a few more races as such. Because ultimately, I just feel like he's kind of like a dead man walking, and that feels wrong that we've got a rookie who's coming in, who's worked so hard to get here, done so well to get here, instantly getting that sort of pressure on your shoulders is just, it must be immense for him. But I personally want him to do well. I would really like to see him, sort of stand his ground, get some results, and make it really difficult for Alpine and make it really unpopular for Alpine to actually move Franco into that seat. And that's nothing against Franco. I've got absolutely nothing against Franco. But for me, they've given him the contract, as in Jack. They've honoured him. They've put him in there. And therefore, he should be the one who takes that forward. He should be the one who actually, at least gets a decent crack of the whip, at least gets a decent run of races. 6 isn't enough. We've got a sprint race very early on in the season. We're going testing in Bahrain, then into the Australian Grand Prix as a season opener. It's not enough time to get up and go. And they're going to need races. They're going to need time. And I just hope that whatever sort of deal they've got going, or Oliver Oakes has got with Flavio in terms of what he does and what he doesn't do, how much sway he gets, I just hope he's got enough sway to give Jack a decent crack at the whip and actually say, do you know what? Here's a chance. Have a few races, have half a season, see if you can get close to Pierre, and make it really difficult for us to bring Franco in. Next up, we're going to talk about Valtteri Bottas and Toto Wolff's comments. Caused a bit of a stir online. I'm not going to be afraid to say that, with what Valtteri's sort of being lined up for with Mercedes. So we know that Valtteri's obviously back in the Mercedes camp. We know he's got one eye on a return to a Formula 1 seat. Now, that is either via Mercedes, if they decide to change their partnership, or, of course, that's via someone coming in like Cadillac, or indeed a seat opening up. So for Mercedes, it made perfect sense. Mick Schumacher's going on to do more UC with Alpine on a full-time basis. And of course, it allows them to have a well-established figure back in there, and a really good figure if they need to make a change. If something happens with their driver lineup, if, for example, something drastic happens with Kimmy's performance and they don't want to give him time, Valtteri is a perfect replacement to come into this side. So let's be honest about it, to come into this team and drive well for them. But there was a lot of talk about, obviously, Valtteri as a person. Now, we know that when Valtteri was at Mercedes, he struggled a bit with his mental health. He talked open and honestly about what it did to him, playing that corporate image. Mercedes like that corporate image. They don't like drivers being flamboyant. They don't like drivers being outspoken. They like drivers to toe the company line. They like drivers to be, not give them any reason or their sponsors any reason for concern. And they like to do that by, pretty much, I would say policing what they say is probably the best way to describe it. So very, very political, very much this is what we do, this is what we stand for, this is what we're going to say. You don't see a lot of press conferences from Mercedes going awry with flamboyant comments. Well, George kind of did at the end of last season with Max, but you know what I mean? It tends to be very controlled, very calculated, not very outspoken, not very controversial. That's how Mercedes like it. Now, Valtteri, since he went to Sauber, obviously has changed his image completely. And we've got the mullet, we've got the moustache, we've got the cracking videos, we've got the fun-loving Valtteri. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. Mercedes, Toto this week has come out and said that the new calendar's a big no-no because we are Mercedes and we don't want that. A lot of fans are saying, but it's for charity. Sure, that's good for the business, good for image. Mercedes are kind of saying, no, that's not us. The mullet, he made a joke about saying, it's ugly, but he can keep it. That caused a bit of controversy, that sort of comment. I think generally that was a very tongue-in-cheek Toto comment. I don't think it was meant in any derogatory way whatsoever. But what they're saying is they want to keep certain points of Valtteri's personality because ultimately they need a character. When they released, well, not when they released Lewis, when Lewis went to Ferrari, they didn't release him, did he? Signed a contract. But when Lewis decided to go to Ferrari, they're now left with George and they're left with Kimi. Now, with all due respect, George isn't the most exciting personality in Formula One. I think it's fair to say. Nothing against his driving, nothing against him as a person. However, when it comes to sponsorship and appeal, George Russell probably isn't up there alongside your top drivers who you think of when you're thinking marketing and you're thinking Formula One drivers. Kimi Antonelli, he's young, he's inexperienced, no one knows how that's going to go. There's a element of Mercedes wanting to shield Kimi, so not opening up to too much media work, not opening up to too much. Vesti is in the same boat. He's not really a well-known name to Formula One fans outside of fans who probably follow Junior Series, Feeder Series and other stuff he does. So they needed a name in from a commercial point of view, from a sponsor point of view, to keep the sponsors happy, to keep everybody happy. Valtteri fits that bill perfectly, as well as fits that bill of a reserve driver who can step in and can actually do a good job. So it's a partnership that at the moment is absolutely brilliant for him. But with that, there's some concessions, and these are the concessions. This is what we're now seeing. We're now seeing that everything that Valtteri did before is going to be toned down while he rejoins Mercedes. It's going to be put on hold. It's not going to be the Valtteri that we saw at Sauber, unfortunately. There will still be some fun stuff going on. Don't get me wrong. We know that Mercedes do that stuff. But if you're expecting things like what we saw with the calendar and stuff like that, and you're a Valtteri fan, I'm afraid you're going to be a bit disappointed while he's returning to Mercedes, because that's not going to happen. In terms of Cadillac and reserve role, with Valtteri obviously being the reserve there, let's just talk about that, because Zhou plays into this one. Now, we had the announcement that I first brought around November time on Coffee Corner Motorsport that Zhou was in talks to be a Ferrari reserve driver. Again, this is a reserve role that makes perfect sense. Now, he's going to share them along with Giovinazzi. As before, they have got an option on Oliver Behrman, but they don't want to take that if they can help it, because he's obviously got a multi-year full-time deal with Haas. So they've got this option with Behrman, which is pretty much a last resort if they wanted to. So you're looking at Giovinazzi and, of course, now Zhou. They're going to share the roles. They're going to share the reserve duties. And, of course, you've got the Ferrari Academy they can tap into if they really wanted to. Now, Zhou, again, is a role that makes sense for Ferrari. He's a former Ferrari Academy driver, so it's like bringing the driver home. Got great commercial appeal, from obviously China and the marketing that he does. Brought a lot of money to Sauber when he's there. I'm sure he's going to do the same for Ferrari. It's a market they really want to break into even more, and having a Chinese driver absolutely fits that bill. And having Zhou also back in there leaves a question open to Cadillac, which is why I'll come on to that one straight away from Valtteri. So we know that Valtteri wants to drive for Cadillac if he can. We also know that Zhou wants to put himself in the frame for that as well. Two former Sauber drivers, established Formula 1 drivers. And we know that Cadillac have talked very open and honest about having one driver who's new to Formula One and having one who's experienced in Formula One. Now, both these drivers fit that bill, but Zhou might just have the upper hand because of the deal. And the reason I say that is Ferrari will be supplying Cadillac with their engines. Now, we've all seen what happens with Honda and engine supply and contracts and not backhanders, but I suppose, sort of deal smoothers that go through. We saw it with Ferrari and Haas before that. Obviously, that's a bit more complicated now. We've got the Toyota partnership with Haas, as we're seeing. But ultimately, when these teams sign up for these things, actually, a lot of the stuff in these contracts, or favours for favours, basically, are that they do you a favour. Now, Zhou being a Ferrari reserve fits for Cadillac coming in on the basis of it's a Ferrari engine. They want to keep Ferrari sweet. Very similar, like I said, to the Haas deal before. So do not be surprised if we see Zhou certainly being muted as an option, certainly being kicked about as an option for the Cadillac drive in next year, even if it's only on a very short 1-2 year deal once they come in and establish. It would make perfect sense to do so with this new role that he's doing at Ferrari. He's a former Ferrari Academy driver. He will be the Ferrari reserve when they enter the grid. It's very easy for them to slide him into that, and that would appease Ferrari, keep them happy. We know that Lewis is on at least a 2 year, it's a 2+1 deal that he's got. We know that Charles is on a long-term deal. We know that they want to bring Oliver Behrman back in. So Zhou realistically hasn't been brought in to drive for Ferrari. He's been brought in for Ferrari for commercial reasons and to provide a backup if they need it. But he is in their long-term future in terms of his seat and the drive. So that makes me wonder if this is a move to get Cadillac on board. This is a move to actually get him doing some simulator sessions with Cadillac, get him, sort of helping them out, getting them ready for their entry in 2026. It's a move that would make a lot of sense from a business, from a commercial. Would bring a huge amount of sponsorship, as we know that Ferrari are tapping into. Cadillac would tap into that as well. It's a market which, they want to be in. It's a market where it appeals to have, the only Chinese driver on the grid currently on your books as well. So, this could just be Zhou playing the long-term game. So short-term playing long-term game where he's with a Ferrari Academy seat, where a Ferrari reserve seat's former Ferrari driver. It looks good on paper, great from a marketing point of view, and just opens up that door for 2026 and Cadillac. And when I saw it, I didn't really make a link at first until the engine supply kind of light bulbs me, and I went, oh my God, is that the plan? Is that what Zhou's plan is? To come in as a reserve driver, and then bang, there you go, into the Cadillac role. In terms of the seats for Cadillac, I've said here, I'm not going to make early predictions for what Cadillac are going to do with their 2026 seats. They've got lots of options between now and when they join the grid in 2026. A lot of drivers, both in a seat, not currently in a seat. We've seen Checo's name being muted in there. He again brings a massive amount of sponsorship money. There's talk that Checo might be being paid off by Red Bull, which means he can't take any role on for the first half of this season. So almost like a driver garden leave because of the contract exit he's negotiated. Interestingly, we've not been talked about with regards to whether or not he's going to do any more for Red Bull. We saw that statement when he first left saying about he was going to be an ambassador type of role, so a bit like what Daniel Ricciardo did a few years ago. We've not seen any confirmation of that. We've not heard anything from that. He's certainly not appearing on anything at the moment. So whether or not he declined that, and whether or not this is just gardening leave at the moment that he's serving out, and that we'll start getting some noise around the summer of a potential return, either in an ambassador role or indeed with somebody else like Cadillac for Checo. It feels that way at the moment. It seems a very amicable split, but not a lot of details have happened with that Red Bull exit. So I expect Checo to be certainly in the mix if you're looking at Cadillac coming in. 1 year deal. I think Gunter Steiner said it just this week where he said, actually, you'd be better off just putting Checo in the car, 1 year deal, established, taking the money. Anything that goes wrong, new engines, new car, new team, actually put him in the team, and then you can then almost sort of just take the money for a year, not worry about performance too much. Cadillac themselves have said they just want respect, so they're not really setting big overarching targets of where they're going to be. You'd expect the engine to be quite good because it's the Ferrari one, but with a new engine, with new regulations, anything can happen. So, I expect that those sort of three names, Bottas, Zhou and Checo, to be firmly being kicked about with regards to Cadillac and 2026 seats. That's for sure. Right. Sip of the coffee. Whew, flying by. 20 minutes in almost. Let's talk Audi headquarters and �𝐿𝐼, because I did a short video on this one. So if you checked it out, there's a bit of repetition here. So apologies for that. We got the news this week that Audi are going to open up headquarters in the UK. And this is very much a rushed decision. They haven't even got a location for it yet. They've just come out with this announcement. They're basically setting up a motorsport hub. Now, they're talking about they're using it because they want to entice the best people, and the best people in Formula One are located in this area. They're not British. This isn't a British biased part. This isn't a British is best. This is a pure geography thing. Most of the top teams in Formula One are based in and around that area in the UK, that motorsport valley, and they make it very easy for the teams to recruit and poach, and for the staff themselves to move between the different organisations without too much upheaval to their family. So before we get the British bias comments, this isn't about that. This is about pure and simple geography. This is where they're located. This is where they are. Why it's here remains to be seen, but they are here. So Audi are going to open up this one in the UK. Now, this is a cost cut manoeuvre. Yeah, it's a cost cut manoeuvre, pure and simple. Now, the cost cap is currently set at $135 million. We know that next year it's going to increase to $215 million. Now, that's being done for a variety of reasons, but it sounds a lot. It's not, because the UK teams are losing their tax concessions that they had with the rise of COVID. So once COVID hit, a lot of the top teams in Formula One, certainly the UK-based ones, they got a nice little a tax kickback. That's now going, so therefore the cost cap's increased for that. The cost of everything has gone up, which the team's been arguing for a while. So whilst on paper, what's that, 80 million or whatever it is, $80 million sounds a lot. It's not. It's going to be swallowed up quite easy. Obviously, based in Switzerland. Audi have committed to having the Sauber headquarters. They've obviously doing the engine side in Germany still, but they're keeping the Sauber headquarters. That was part of the takeover deal. They're now obviously 100% owners. And with all of this in play, it's costing them around 20 to 25% more being based in Switzerland. The cost of living is much higher. It's a lot harder to recruit. They haven't got the power that Ferrari have. So Ferrari have trouble recruiting, but it's Ferrari. When you see a job offer, you're going to go, it's Ferrari. Sauber and Audi haven't got that same lure. Whilst, yes, Switzerland might be a very attractive place to live, it costs considerably higher. And also location-wise, for a lot of the teams, when they're based in the UK, a lot of the staff who are looking to move would not want to make that move. That makes it incredibly hard for Sauber to recruit. And then when they do recruit, they're obviously facing challenges with their wages, because they're saying our wage bill is 20-25% more. It costs a lot more. It's about 30% of your cost cap in terms of wages is what you currently spend. So they're at a complete disadvantage from doing it this way. So I think I sort of figure that most of the top teams got an average of 90,000 in terms of the average sort of figure that they're quoted. Sauber was like 125, to just give you an idea, for the same staff, the same bracket, the same amount. So it's costing them considerably more. So the answer, we're going to build a hub in the UK. We're going to move to the UK. And then what we're going to do then is we're then going to poach everybody, is probably the best way to describe it. They haven't disclosed the location yet. The normal locations will be around the sort of area. So they'll either go down towards where obviously McLaren are based, or they head into the middle pass, the sort of Silverstone area and around there, sort of Oxford area, where they can recruit staff from the top teams that way. So they want this open in the summer. So it is a very knee-jerk reaction. It is a very fast reaction. It's purely a cost cap point of view. I don't see it being anything other than that, because why would you have three bases? It makes absolutely no sense. The engine base, you can argue, Mercedes do that. They obviously have Brixworth, and then they have Brackley. For those who don't know, Brixworth is obviously where the Mercedes engines and the powertrains are done, and then Brackley is where the actual team and the chassis is done. So they run off two separate bases. So that's not unknown to Formula One. It's something that works. Obviously, in this case, this is what Audi want to do, but they want this hub in the UK where they can attract the best engineers, very much like 𝐵𝐷𝐿𝐴 RB did. So 𝐵𝐷𝐿𝐴 RB for years were based in Bicester, where they had all of the aero package in there. So even though they've got the factory in Italy, obviously they got the Red Bull tyre, we know that, but their actual design facilities and their aero team was based in the UK deliberately to poach those people. They've now moved to a purpose building that's on the site at Red Bull in Milton Keynes, which again makes sense from a cost cap point of view. So they've done that this year. They've moved out the offices, shut them down, got their own standalone facility at the Red Bull campus, and they've moved in there, saving a load of money that way. So all of these make perfect sense from a cost cap point of view. It makes sense to open up this headquarters. It makes sense to be able to do it to attract the latest sort of people from Formula One. Adrian Newey, we touched on that on the podcast last week, has talked about how the cost cap has actually stopped people recruiting. It means that people, when they leave university, are actually getting better paid jobs outside of Formula One. which never used to be the case. The cost cap's done that. So whilst the cost cap has been great for teams, and it's been great for keeping those teams in business, keeping that bottom line cash flow going, keeping that balance sheet looking healthy. In terms of staff retention and recruitment, it's actually gone the other way because teams can't offer the sort of high base salaries they used to in the past. So whilst we talk about Formula One being the pinnacle of motorsport, from a cost point of view or from a wages point of view, for the people involved, it's not necessarily the case now. And that is hindering new people, new ideas coming into the sport. As Adrian alluded to on it, that's one of the biggest factors he said about the cost cap, where actually it's, people are going off to do other things because Formula One isn't as attractive as what it may be, sort of pre-cost cap era. So this is why Audi are doing it. It makes it even harder when you're based in Switzerland, makes it harder when you're not tapped into that motorsport valley. And yeah, like I say, be interested to see where it goes. My guess is somewhere around Silverstone or taking over a factory somewhere or something like that if a team has a takeover. Some of it's going to be online, but that's purely why that one is. And that brings us to the final one, which we're going to talk about, which is Aston Martin. Let me have a sip of coffee for this. We've got quite a few bits to cover on Aston Martin. So, Aston Martin, they've been in the news all week. They've obviously just entered WEC. That Valkyrie looks amazing. Who thought of putting the 007 logo on as well? Absolutely, marketing masterclass on that one. I mean, if you haven't already, go over to Aston Martin, check out the WEC, check out what they're doing. Lots to talk about. Max Verstappen, 1 billion. I did a video on that one this week. So for those who don't know, there's been talk that one of the main investors in Aston Martin, so someone very close to Lawrence Stroll, has been going around touting that they want to sign Max on a 1 billion 5-year deal made up of a base salary and a variety of share options. Aston Martin have denied it. Red Bull have denied it. Max has denied it. Whether or not it's true or not remains to be seen. As I said on the video, Aston Martin is one of only probably 2 teams who could afford Max if he left Red Bull. Mercedes being the other one. Ferrari would, but they'd have to get rid of a Lewis or a Charles, which can't see happening. McLaren are quite happy with their lineup, probably wouldn't pay the sort of money that you'd have to secure Max from a business point of view. So I think realistically, if Max does go, it's going to be to one of those two. Lots of talk on whether Ford will deliver a good engine. Otmar came out defending Ford just this week, saying Ford aren't new to engines. They're not really that new to Formula One. They've just stepped away over recent years. So whilst everyone's panicking that we're going to rock up next season with a transit engine, Otmar's saying these guys know what they're doing. They've been working with this technology for a while. They know about the sort of 50% electric and the regulation of that one. We should trust them a bit. We've heard the noise of it. The sound of it's quite good. Jim Farley shared the noise of the Red Bull Ford engine on his social media this week. So again, if you haven't, go check that one out. It'd be really good to hear. It's got a nice turbo whine in it, which kind of takes you back. Engine noise is a lot of talk. But yeah, going back to Aston Martin, obviously they're in the final phase of their development. They've got Adrian come in. They've got new signings starting, new technical director starting in Qatar. They've got all this stuff going on. And of course, the possibility of trying to lure Max. But what does it mean for them? What's going on here? Now, WEC is the route they want to go into. We've talked about, we've seen this just this week alone, where Fernando Alonso wants to team up with Max and he wants to drive, in something like Le Mans and probably use the Valkyrie or something like that if they can use it in there. They talked openly and honestly about that one. And I think this is their route into probably siding Lance Stroll into another series. So we know that Lance isn't going to get sacked anytime soon because his dad doesn't want to sack him. We know that ultimately he would like to win a Formula One World Championship with Lance in a car. The chances of that are probably looking quite unlikely, if I'm being honest, without being derogatory to Lance. It just doesn't strike me as a partnership that's made to win a Formula One World Championship. Lando, we know, is at the end of his career. We know that he's winding down in terms of the last couple of years. He's been open that when his contract runs out at the end of 2026, that's probably going to be it in terms of Formula One and the demands that Formula One brings. So that leaves Aston Martin open basically to seats, which if you're a driver, it's fantastic. Let's be honest, a proposition of going to Aston Martin with this amazing factory. Can't get into that factory. If you are listening to Aston Martin, I would love to see what you've done with that facility since the Jordan days. I remember it being the Jordan factory, so I'd love to see what you've done with it. I've been watching the videos online. Shameless plug there. But yeah, so they want to see this. They've talked about getting their new wind tunnel online for the first time ever. They're not sharing Mercedes anymore. We've seen the benefits of that from obviously McLaren using their own wind tunnel and having the most up-to-date wind tunnel, how you don't get the correlation problems the team's been suffering. So everything's looking positive with WEC. Does that allow them to slide Lance into WEC? Does that free up a seat for someone like Yuki coming in as part of the Honda deal? We've spoken about where does Yuki fit in? Where does Honda fit in? Where does a Honda driver fit into this new partnership? Is this the answer? We slide, Lance across into WEC. We bring someone like Yuki in, or even another Honda back driver, bring them in. That kind of feels like where Aston Martin are with this. So could we be seeing the end of Lance from that point of view? And then it's a nice, easy move off into a different series. Off you go and do it that way. But it's exciting to see the growth of Aston Martin. It's exciting to see what they've done, the turnaround they've done, the things that they're doing with the fan engagement, how they are running the team, what's come in, what those facilities look like, because they look absolutely out of this world. And they are becoming a powerhouse, but they need some results. The problem is Aston Martin have got all the tools now. There's no excuse. We know they've changed team principles. We know that obviously Andy Cowles took temporary charge at the moment whilst Mike Cracker's stepped down. But ultimately, Lawrence wants a return on investment, and he's clear on what that return is. Now, that return isn't podiums. That return isn't, seeing Fernando on the podium or even seeing Lance on the podium. It is the World Drivers' Championship. It's the Constructors' Championship. That is what Lawrence is going for. Aston Martin have got everything in place to deliver that. There are no excuses. They've gone out and got Adrian. They broke the bank and signed the most successful designer in Formula One history. There can be no excuses anymore for Aston Martin. Yes, this season will be a bit of hit and miss. Adrian obviously joins in a few weeks' time. Development-wise, he's focused firmly on 2026. We've done that on the podcast far too many times. He will have a look at 2025, as I've said on my lives and stuff, no doubt about it. But ultimately, he's coming in with that focus on 2026. And by being behind, he's not going to have time to do too much 2025 car. So it kind of leaves this season as a season in limbo, and then everything banked into 2026 and new regulations. But like I say, with a top-of-the-range facilities, with a top designer, with money being no object, with no stone unturned, there begs one question with Aston Martin. Is the driver lineup good enough to deliver a World Championship and a World Constructors' Championship if they've got the car to do that? Big question marks on that one. Still don't know the answer, if I'm honest. Fernando, we know he's in the twilight of his career. Has he got enough? He will give it his best shot. He will be in amongst it, don't get me wrong. But actually, is that partnership strong enough to deliver it? Or do Aston Martin need to make some tough choices? And is his role in WEC just a way of them doing that? So that's pretty much all I've got for this week in terms of news. Obviously, we're getting close to Formula One. F1 75 is around the corner. We're now a couple of weeks away from that. Once we finish that, we're going to be straight into car launches, straight into pre-season testing at the end of the month. We're in February. We're almost there. The winter is almost gone. In terms of Coffee Corner Motorsport, we're obviously going to F1 75, so myself and Dad are going. We bought our ticket before anyone comes at me in the comments on that one as well. I didn't buy my ticket. Our stepdaughter Sophie bought the ticket. She went online at the same time as me. She got a ticket, transferred them to us, so we're not going as part of any agreement with anybody. We're purely going as paying fans, stuck in the seats where you're going to get a nosebleed at the top. But generally can't wait. It looks good. 7 minutes each team's got. Lots of exciting things going on before we actually get to the live event. London for a couple of days, F1 exhibition with Dad. It's going to be quite cool. Dad's looking forward to it. He, spoke to him just this week about it. He's looking forward to the new season, seeing where it takes us. We haven't made too many plans yet, which is normally what we do. We don't tend to make too many plans. We tend to see where the season takes us. But we're almost there. We're almost at the end of this winter break. We're almost at the end of the podcast. So I won't keep you much more. That's about 30 minutes or so. You've been listening to me, Terry. This is Coffee Corner Motorsport 4 Beans podcast. And this has been your weekly Formula One news show, Espresso News. Before you go, don't forget, hit that like, subscribe, follow, and enable those notifications so you'll know when the next episode of Formula One Espresso News drops. And have a good week. I'll see you soon.